program anyway, and what Wendy was just talking about. The one thing about this is I volunteer for far too much stuff. I've been accused of having a gravity-challenged right hand that drifts up in different meetings, and I'm on a lot of different...
You're lowering your voice.
Okay, so...
For people to continue to hear you.
All right, maybe we will use the microphone. How does that sound? Rather than take the chance. Anyway, one of the points I wanted to make about this is the fact that there's an awful lot of certification, a lot of certifications coming up in the renewable energy world. We're certifying equipment, we're certifying the installers, and it's a whole different world than it was back in the 80s during the tax credit years of the 80s. And a lot of interesting things developing. A little bit of history. A long time ago, there was a booming wind business in this country. Over 200,000 wind turbines were in operation back in the 30s and 40s. And then the Rural Electric Administration came through, the REA, hooked up everybody with almost too cheap to meter electricity. Those were the days. And they wouldn't hook you up if you had a wind turbine on your farm, and so they all went away. And that was the end of the industry, but I love those prices. I mean, I would pay $15 for a wind turbine, and that includes the radio. That's a really good deal. A little bit of terminology, a little tongue-in-cheek here. They're called windmills. Well, windmills are really the water pumpers. And you've got turbine and a wind turbine. And I love the look on that guy's face because he just looks resigned to wearing that big thing on his head. So here's what we're here to talk about today. We've got the really small turbines off to the left-hand side here, and that's small wind. And the definition of small wind is anything under 100 kilowatts in rating. The big guys on the right, well, those are the ones that cause all kinds of controversy. Those are the commercial wind turbines. I have no personal thing against them. They make more money than I do. They can defend themselves. We defend small wind. Grid tie wind. By grid tie, we mean anything that's connected to the utility. You can have off-grid wind. You can have wind that charges batteries, and you can provide independent power with a small wind turbine, with solar panels. That's my system at home. In this particular case, this is a grid tie, and we sell back to the utility. That's actually not correct. You don't sell anything back to the utility. It's a credit system. It's called net metering, which we'll get to in a minute. Three-phase wild AC is produced by the wind turbine. It's totally unusable. I have customers that say, well, if it produces AC power, why can't I run the house off of it? Well, if you like the smell of burning electronics and flickering lights and little things burning up directly off of that three-phase variable frequency, variable voltage AC, go for it, but that's not what we do. Processed through an inverter. An inverter turns it into utility quality, actually a little bit better than utility quality power. And it phases in with the grid. There's no big switch that decides whether you're running your place off of the wind turbine or you're running off of the utility. It just mingles with it and it goes where it wants to go. Electricity is inherently lazy. It takes the path of least resistance, and it's going to go out into the utility grid if it has nothing left to do on your home or your farm. If you have a lot of loads running and you're producing less than what you're using on your home or farm, it's going to stay on the property and it's going to offset some of your electric bill. But when it does go out into the road, well, we'll get to that in a second because I'm jumping ahead here. That's just a basic simple block diagram of what a grid wind system looks like without battery storage. And it has a choice to make. It can go out to the grid, or it can satisfy the loads in the house, or sometimes both at the same time. Net metering is what I was starting to talk about a minute ago, where if you run your meter backwards, so to speak, meaning you're generating more power than you're using on the property, and it can't go anywhere but out onto the utility grid because you're generating in excess, then you run your meter backwards and you generate a credit. You're reducing your electric bill with the excess. You're also reducing the electric bill because you're powering the loads in the home, and you're not pulling that through the meter from the utility, and you're not increasing your electric bill. So at the end of the year, if you still have, they rectify it every 12 months. You could maybe get some zero utility bills if you have a large enough wind turbine, good wind, and a small enough electric usage. Up to the point where you zero out your electric bill over 12 months, it's an even trade of retail rate. If you pay 15 cents a kilowatt hour, that's what they credit you with for your excess. But at the end of the year, if you still have a generated excess, say you're 1,000 kilowatt hours over, they can pay you at avoided costs, which is anywhere between 2 and 4.5 cents, what I've seen on most of my customers' electric bills. Therefore, it makes no sense to oversize the system to generate a whole bunch of electricity and get rich off the utility. You never will. That's not the intent of net metering. And when I say meter spins, and I have that in quotes, the old mechanical meters were great because you could sit there and watch the meter go backwards. I had customers that I would go to for a checkup after 6 months or a year. There'd be a lawn chair out by the utility meter, and they were watching it. I guess it's better than watching grass grow, but now they have the digital meters. It's nowhere near as sexy. They credit you, and you can read it on one of the digital channels that comes around the view, but it's nowhere near as much fun as watching that old mechanical meter go backwards. I miss those. So. Now here's a grid system with storage. This is very rare. It's very expensive to put battery capabilities onto a grid wind system, and so we just don't do it. It's really not cost effective. What this means is, and this is true for solar and wind, solar electric and wind, if you don't have battery backup in the system and the utility power goes out in your neighborhood, your power goes out as well. You can have that nice spinny thing in the backyard, you can have the little sparkly things on the roof with the solar panels, but you don't have any utility power. Battery backup's the only way to have that. And it's expensive, and it reduces, the batteries are expensive and reduces the cost, the efficiency of the system. So what we tell people is it's more cost effective to put a backup generator in, and a lot of farms have them anyway, and you just use them. So, hybrid system is more than one generating source. For instance, in this case, this is wind turbine and a solar module and a backup generator. And this is how I run my home off-grid. By the way, I don't recommend going off-grid. You don't save any money. It's a great way to get rid of teenage kids if they're of age to leave home, but they're just lingering when you start being the power Nazi and you ration every watt because it's precious. And they think you've lost your minds and they leave home. We didn't realize that at the time. We might have done it a couple of years earlier, but nonetheless, that's how it worked out. And mom and dad they went completely insane, lost their minds, and they couldn't wait to get out. Now, mom and dad were ahead of the curve, and wow, we got really smart over the last few years. So, but yeah, so I don't recommend going off-grid. You don't save any money that way. Here's an example here. If anybody ever gets out on I-86 out past Elmira, just to the east of Elmira, where the speed limit bumps back up on the other side of Elmira, there's a wind turbine that's been up since 1982, and we rebuilt it for the gentleman. And when I asked him how often he'd had it serviced, he said, "Service? What service?" So we rebuilt the turbine, and he said, "I'd like some of those solar thingies on my front porch." So we put 2.5 kilowatts of solar up on his front porch there. And last year he got a $28 check back from the utility company. So he has no electric bill. And he's very, very, very happy man. Now he'd very much like to put more solar up, but he can't, because through the NYSERDA program, you can't generate that much excess. We can't put a system in that gives you more than 110% of your historical annual electric usage. So he's just going to have to be happy with his little checks that come in every so often from the utility company. This is the sum